You got nothing if you don't have a great team. And I always had a great team of people to work with. So
Yeah.
this interview, I want to make a real shout out. The bottom line is that I was not a successful businessman. I was a successful game designer.
So you think the fall of GPG was really down to an inability to get new publishing deals?
Maybe people didn't like me. A bit of a loose cannon, maybe.
Yeah, you just need a PR team, right?
Well, the PR team would be like, "Are you ready for this guy?" Super Commander 2 sold. I think it ended up selling a couple of million units all total. But yeah, I'm not done with games. I'm done with the gaming industry. I'm in a mode where if I can't make games out of my own bank account, I'm not making them.
Why is that?
So at the end of the day, we made a million unit selling game, and we got 0.
But you financed the production of an amazing game.
Yeah, we blood, sweat, and tears. Plus, I'm older now. It's kind of a young man's or a young person's game.
No, it's
you
not.
know.
It's the godfather of RTS's game. That's whose game it is.
Yeah, that's right. You want a cappuccino? Huh? Hey, can we get a couple of cappuccinos over here? And then I'm going to shoot you. Like, if I were to make Total Annihilation 2, I would damn near make Total Annihilation 1 again. Like, if somebody was out there listening, right, and they really thought that making another Supreme Commander like it was, and they wanted to write a check, it would be a $25 to $35 million check.
I know you personally want to build things from scratch because you love it, right? And that's what you want to do. But from budgetary point of view, let's just use Unity and save $10 million in.
Top-notch game designers, developers, engineers are hard to find.
Yeah, rare. But you don't even need top-notch because throw determinism in the bin and just make a server-side sort of simulation. And
we're going to throw determinism in the bin?
It just doesn't have to be deterministically simulated, because if the server is doing all the calculations, then
that's true. They're dividing the cost.
Yeah, but you can have one of the players as a server. So you just pick the player you do.
Today, with fiber and low latency networks, what you just proposed is actually a viable solution.
So this is why we don't need $25 million to build Supcom 3. We don't need to build it to be... You can see there is a glaring hole in the RTS industry. There's none.
I like where you're going with this, because you want to build this. You want to build this.
There's a couple of people who want to do this sort of stuff.
If we're going to build this thing, let's figure it out. Let's do this thing. Like kids, let's do it. I got some lumber.
So we've got a small budget game, and we've got Chris Taylor. So now we just need a publisher. Who's that?
I know Fred, the CEO of Paradox, and I can shoot him an email and I can say there's an appetite to build a Supreme Commander 3.
Yeah.
What do you think, Fred? That we can start there.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do we need first? We need a script.
Hello everybody, today I'm here with Chris Taylor, the designer of Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander, the founder of Gas-Powered Games, who worked on countless other games, and for a period was also the general manager of Wargaming. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, it's my pleasure.
So, in response to the last video, we had lots and lots of different questions from the community. I think some you can potentially answer with the answer no or yes. Some of them are pretty easy, but some will be harder than others. The question everybody's asking is, when are we going to see Supcom 3?
That is it's a perfectly valid question. It's just not one that I can answer, because years ago, I forget what year it was exactly. It might have been 2010. That sounds about right. I sold the Supreme Commander IP. When I say I mean Gas-Powered Games sold the IP to Square Enix. And it was just after, if you guys remember, there was this huge economic crisis and businesses were going broke. There were banks that needed to be bailed out. We weren't able to get contracts. Excuse me. We weren't able to get contracts. So we were in tough financial shape. So I sold Supreme Commander to Square Enix. And it's the last thing in the world you want to do. It's like if you've got a beautiful, antique car that you've been building or working on, or something valuable to you that it's frankly irreplaceable is what I'm going for. Maybe a painting or something, or perhaps maybe even a video game IP. Where that's the last thing you want to do is sell it, but you do need to make payroll. You do need to keep the business running. And at the end of the day, you're in the business of inventing games, creating IPs. So we kind of had the justification of, well, if we want to do another RTS game, we'll just design one from scratch, because that's what I did with Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander and Dungeon Siege. So we'll invent a new one. As it turned out, we didn't, because of the way the business kind of moved forward. But sorry to give you such a long-winded answer for something simple as, I don't own the IP. I don't decide. Square Enix owns it. And if they called me on the phone and they said, hey, Chris, we would love for you to design Supreme Commander 3, that's a conversation that I would have with them if they called. And, I don't think they're going to call, because they aren't focused on RTS games.
What about them selling it to someone who is?
That's a good idea. But what happens with a lot of larger software publishing companies, they tend to buy IP. They don't tend to sell it. It's like a one-way ticket into the vault at the back of the publishing building. I mean, there is great IP, by the way, not just Supreme Commander, which I love, of course. There's great IP locked away in vaults all over the world that will never see the light of day. They will never see the light of day. It's almost like they've been purchased to hide and lock. And like imagine a painting that's purchased and then stuck in not in someone's house, not in their study or in their library, but in a dark vault where no one can see the picture. That's kind of what happens to IP. And I'm not picking on Square Enix. I'm saying it happens all across our industry.
Yeah. And did the sale of Supreme Commander keep JPG running for a while longer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we sold Dungeon Siege and Supreme Commander, and between those, the money that we brought in, we were able to really. The sad reality of it is, we owed the bank money. We borrowed money from the bank to keep the business running. So that's your first line of defense, right? The first line is not to sell off the family jewels. The first line is to go borrow money so that you can pay the money back and then keep the family jewels. Yep. But we ran out of runway, and we ended up owing the bank and then selling the IP to pay the bank back, which made the bank happy. And then, of course, your bank payment goes way down, and that indirectly means you can operate the business on less cash flow. So that was what happened.
Right. And what other things did you try to save the day there? Like, you would have tried to pitch more games and get more money from new publishers?
Well, we did Supreme Commander 2 with Square Enix. So as part of the deal, we sold them the IP and got a contract to make the sequel. It came, of course, this story very well. It came with the requirement that we also do the Xbox 360 version.
Yeah.
And that is not the natural state of the world, is to do it. But we thought we did a pretty good job. The problem is the limited memory on the 360 for such a big game. So we had to make a bunch of design changes and make some tough choices to fit it on both platforms, which I've told this story many, many times. A lot of folks don't give me or the team or the company much of a break. They kind of still hold us accountable for the compromises we made. And hey, rightfully so. I mean, when if you buy anything in the market today and someone says, well, you don't know the whole story behind why we put less steel in the frame of something. Mm-hmm. You don't go, oh, thanks for letting me know. You lowered your shipping costs, or you lowered your cost of goods, or you made, nobody cares. That's a terrible excuse, but that was the reason, right? That was the business decision.
Not enough metal.
Yeah, the video, never enough metal. You know, the video game business is a tough business. And the way to make the games business not so tough is to make a ton of money on your first game. Let's use Valve as an example. When Valve launched Half-Life, it sold amazing, right? It sold, I don't know, 10 million copies, probably 5 to 10 million copies of Half-Life 1.
Yeah.
That set that company up with tons of cash where they could call all their own shots and they had nobody breathing down their neck. And they built on that. We never made money from game one. We sold 1 million copies of Dungeon Siege and we never made any money. So we were right away, we were in worse shape than the day we started. And the reason why is because when you start a company, you're like 1 or 2 people. By the time you finish a game, you have 60 people. The next day, when you go to start, you're like starting your company all over again. And you immediately have a payroll for 60 people.
Yeah.
It's better almost to disband a company and then rehire people from scratch again. It's not, but it almost is when you look at the economics. So if you don't have a hit game, you're kind of already in trouble as a game company. And one day maybe I'll write a book on it because I think it's something that people really need to understand. I think it's why indie games do so well, because at the end of your indie game, you don't have a big payroll. You just still got the same maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and you're all co-owners, which means that nobody expects a paycheck. They're all back to living off of the, off of having a meager existence until that big hit comes in. But when you start a company and you've got high-paid engineers, you have to pretty much make payroll. Anyway, maybe we'll save this for a whole talk on the economics or the business of running a game company, but it directly affects and translates into business decisions which affect why games are what they are. It is a business.
I'm interested in it now. Let's talk about it now. I like
if you want to talk about
discussion.
I'm an open book now, right? Because I'm sort of semi-retired out of the games business, if you will. So for me, I'm returning gaming to a hobby. It was a profession for 30 years, and now it's a hobby again with Kanugi. I shouldn't say it's a hobby because it's a C Corp. It's incorporated in Delaware, and it's a real business. But for me, I'm approaching it more like I did in the old days when it was just less intense, more of a passion than it was than it's a business.
Yeah, so I always assume it's Supreme Commander 2 that because I didn't play it too much, but on the Xbox version, I imagine it didn't do too well because the controls are crap without a mouse. I imagine that was why it.
Well, if you want to talk about that, I thought the controls were surprisingly good on an X. If you've never played it, I wonder if I've got a copy around. Although you'd have to dig up an Xbox. I think it's fair to say remember when GoldenEye came out on the I forget what it was. Was it the N?
Was it GameCube?
Was it the GameCube?
Oh, it might have been N64.
And it was like the first. It was like the first GoldenEye on the Nintendo, one of the early Nintendos, and the controls were kind of shit for a shooter. But they were encouraging. There was something there. There was something worth kind of going forward and looking deep. And then Halo came out. And there was a lot of skeptics when Halo came out. People were like, we don't know about shooters. And I was like, man, keyboard mouse. I was keyboard mouse. And it was like, how are you ever going to give you that pinpoint high resolution accuracy for that quick snap and shoot move?
Yeah.
And by God, Halo used aiming logic that kind of cheated for the player, made it easier to hit something, and it took sort of like the rough edges out of it, and then it's only got better since then.
Yeah.
And it got tweaked. So I considered Supreme Commander 2 on the console to kind of be the GoldenEye, where we kind of got it to first base. We got it much farther than it had been got, where there was potential.
But it wasn't too bad because I never played it on Xbox, so I just assumed it would be terrible because, how do you select units very quickly? It's just really hard to do, right, and inconvenient.
Yeah, if you use it, you'll see we had this whole cool brush system, and you could pick up and double click and pick up like units, and it sort of absorbed them. And it was not trying to be a mouse. It was trying to be a console experience, and I think it succeeded. And there were people who got good at it and who enjoyed it, but competitive level play, it was a notch or two down from competitive level play. You wouldn't be able to go toe to toe with somebody in a competitive environment. Is my understanding.
No, but you could play other Xbox players, I guess.
You play other Xbox, yeah. And you remember there was a Halo RTS game done on the 360, and those guys actually did some good work as well. And I think it was done by I think it was done by Ensemble Studios, the same folks who did Age of Empires Online.
And did you see your influence in that? Did they use any of your ideas?
I don't know. I don't know if they came out after. I think Halo 2 did. The Halo game, the Halo sequel game did, but you never know. I mean, some of these ideas are people we call it, friendly creative borrowing of interface. We all have to. I mean, let's face it, right? It's an art form where it's like if you watch a movie, you're Quentin Tarantino and you're watching old films and you see a really cool shot or you see a really cool camera trick, you use it, right? That's right. You don't even think twice. And the director or the cinematographer of that old film doesn't watch a Quentin Tarantino movie and go, he stole that from me. He doesn't say that. In fact, he goes, hey, that's cool. He used my shot. So,
yeah, I thought you might just enjoy that some of your decisions still in play.
I think I've been called an influential game designer once or twice because I like to push the boundaries and I like to do things that haven't been done before, and then it influences a thought process. Yeah. Like Strategic Zoom is a no-brainer for influencing a strategic game. I mean, I don't know of one game I ever want to play that doesn't allow me to zoom out. I mean, I want to see the whole game board. I mean, it just, why wouldn't you?
I don't know. Why don't they build that in every RTS? Like, they have these low-level squad-based tactics where it's all, I guess they're micro games, aren't they? So zooming out is not really what it's about.
It's a design decision for some, and it's a technical decision for others. Because if you want to do a strategic zoom implementation, you've got to understand dynamic LOD. And dynamic LOD takes time. And some folks, their brains just automatically go, oh, yeah, that's easy, because it kind of is. And other engineers will go, oh, no, we can't do that. I can't render everything in the view at one time. I can't do that. It'll kill the way it depends on the way the core engine is built. Mm-hmm. See, we designed Supreme Commander 1.0 with the strategic zoom in it from day one. I mean, I just finished the core design document for it back in like 2002, or I think it was 2002. And I knew I wanted strategic zoom. I had this light come on, and I was like, that would kick ass if you could zoom out. Yeah. But what was really important was that you put the cursor somewhere, and that wherever the cursor was, when you wheeled in, it zoomed into where the cursor was. It didn't just zoom into the center of the map. Do you know how many apps I loaded up when I came into the office and I rolled the wheel and it zoomed into the center? Yeah. Art apps.
Yeah.
Other game apps.
That's something special about strategic zoom. Google Maps does it as well.
Yeah, they do it now.
Yeah.
But back then there was no Google Maps. There was I know there wasn't.
So is that something that you designed on paper before there was code?
Yeah, I mean, when you say design it on paper, I mean, it's a text document, it's a Word doc, and you say zoom where the cursor is on the screen.
Yeah, and that's visionary, right?
Well, it's, you know what, I think it technically is. You could argue and be right that it was visionary, but it was small visionary, because the idea would be eventually, it's like electric cars. I mean, they had one 100 and something years ago, and we knew they were coming. Like flying car. The first person who built a flying car, you going to call that person visionary? Yep. You know, well, maybe you're going to call them a genius because they figured out how to power a car that flies. Okay, with the power problem. But yeah, I thought the strategic zoom was obvious.
No, I think it's obvious to zoom out, maybe, but to visualize it in your head enough to say, oh yeah, and we need to zoom in on the cursor. that's kind of like taking a leap. And then also
Yeah.
you have another problem with like, you know, the map boundaries. And if you just zoom on the cursor, you can 80% of the screen can be off, not the map. It can just be
Yeah,
this big black box.
you have to do a little bit of math. I wouldn't even
Yeah,
call it an algorithm, but you have to have a little bit of math
yeah,
that pushes the clips so the screen edge doesn't go off.
yeah.
It's not a trivial problem, but it's not the hardest problem that was solved in the RTS world.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you could see it. I would probably come up with the idea and then refine it for ages without after I'd built it the wrong way first. It sounds like you're a few steps ahead of that.
You're very kind in being honest about maybe how you would approach it. But what was surprising is there were art programs, right? Or an art program where you would paint, and then you would zoom out. It would pull out. Pulling out is easy. And then I would go to want to paint back on that spot, and I'd want to zoom in, and I'd put the cursor there, and it would zoom into the middle of the screen. It's like the designer of the software didn't even take 5 minutes to think about what the user was experiencing. And you know where the cursor is. I mean, my God, it's just linear math. It's not rock. It's not even. It's not like quaternions. It's just some simple.
Yeah.
So
and when you zoom out, it doesn't zoom out on the cursor, does it? It zooms out to the middle of the map.
Yeah, and it needs to zoom out from. So so if you roll the cursor in and it zooms to where the cursor is, and you roll the cursor out, it should pull back along that same path. And then if you roll in, it should roll back into that same spot.
Right.
It has to be completely predictive and determinate. It cannot go to different places every time you zoom. There cannot be accumulated error in the zooming mathematics. It has to take you back to the same thing. So I implemented this in Intergalactic Space Empire, my new space RTS, and I'll zoom out to see the entire multiple galaxies, and then zoom all the way into a single ship that's sitting around an asteroid, and it goes right to the same pixel. So you can go, and you hold down the shift key as a modifier, and you go, zoom, multiple galaxies, zoom, the ship, zoom, multiple galaxies, the ship, and it's spot on.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry, I get into it a little bit. Maybe I'm passionate about this subject. I don't know.
Well, I think we're interviewing you because we're interested in learning about these subjects. So
if you want to build an RTS game,
yeah,
I think this is going to be this interview, and the one maybe we do another one too at some point. This is going to be an interview that a young aspiring RTS designer would probably want to watch, because we're going to probably end up unearthing a lot of the dirty secrets underneath the design of Supreme Commander and Total Annihilation. I got a feeling that's going to happen on this call.
What is a dirty secret in Supreme Commander?
Oh man, what's a dirt? Well, okay, maybe I'm overselling it. It's clickbait. Dirty secret, and then you click on it, and it's not very dirty. Yeah. And you go, damn it, they just want to sell me that ad.
Damn it.
You can put that on the heading of this. Chris Taylor tells dirty secrets.
Dirty secret clickbait.
We'll double our views.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, it's not so much Supreme Commander. It's my RTS design. It's my RTS design approach. It goes back to Total Annihilation. Okay. So let's talk. You want to talk about some? I want to talk about some RTS design.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So when I was working at Electronic Arts, I was working on a bunch of games. I did, as you probably know, I did Hardball 2 and 4D Sports Boxing, and they were sports games. And then FIFA Soccer was this massive hit on the Sega Genesis. And the guys who did that were just so passionate about it. And they looked at me and they said, "Hey Chris, you did Hardball 2. How would you like to do triple play baseball? How would you like to do the sort of baseball that is the sibling to FIFA Soccer? We'll do it in the same. We'll use the same engine, the same perspective, the same character design, like the little men that ran around in soccer, or they'll look like that in baseball, but with baseball uniforms on." And I did that. And I took on that project, and I was working on triple play baseball, and I really learned a lot of lessons building baseball games that I applied to Total Annihilation. And that is a really weird thing for people to hear, because why?
Yep.
Well, the reason is that both Hardball 2 and Triple Play Baseball were using an isometric ish fixed 2D. The picture on the screen was two-dimensional. You couldn't move the camera, right? Which meant that the perspective wouldn't shift, because we all know what happens, right? The 3D has to reproject everything, and it gets this sort of weird, you get this weird thing. Like if you scroll across a map like you do in baseball when the ball's hit, and you're scrolling, and you don't change the perspective because it's an isometric view, you can use a giant picture. And in that case, on the Genesis, it was all tiles, and on the PC, it was just a giant bitmap that was compressed. We had to be very careful with the 512K of memory. Well, the ball would travel out onto when you hit it, it would travel out in 3D, and you're like, well, wait a minute. If it's 3D, how can it be 3D? It's a 2D image, but it looks good. It looks good, like. And it hits and it bounces. And so what do you get when you hit a baseball? You get a little bit of air resistance. So if you modeled the parabolic curve, the ball is slowing as it goes through the air. So it's not a perfect reflection, right?
Yeah.
Oh, when it hits the ground, it loses energy that's absorbed in the ground. It gets into basic Newtonian physics. Where you're just taking, and then the bounce is a little less, and then you get into a roll, and then it hits the fence or goes over the fence. And, I had all that in my head. And then when I moved away from Electronic Arts and I moved down to Washington State, and I teamed up with Ron Gilbert, creator of Monkey Island, the Scum engine, the Scum system, and then started a company called Humongous Entertainment. I was sitting there. That's just a little background for folks. And I was like, let me get this straight. You have Command and Conquer, and Command and Conquer had, and I hope I don't, if I'm boring you, if I'm going too deep on this, you can pull me back.
Just keep going.
Okay, and you can edit. So you can edit this. So basically what happened was I knew that I wanted to compete with Command and Conquer. And Command and Conquer was a 2D bitmap style game where you took a tank and you rendered it. First of all, you modeled it in 3D, and you rendered it with beautiful lighting and beautiful effects. And then you rendered it in all of these different directions, and you saved those pre-rendered bitmaps.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to do something that was generated in 3D. I wanted the units to move in 3D. And I also wanted all the all the trajectories. I didn't want them firing flat. If you remember Command and Conquer, they fire flat. Okay, which is true if a tank shoots you from 50 feet away. The projectile is dropping, but negligibly, because the muzzle velocity is so fast, right? So it's a bit of a cheat, but it kind of works. It's a game after all. But I wanted terrain that was 3D, and I wanted the projectile to travel over, and so you could build a base behind a hill strategically. I love that strategy. Placement on the map matters. So I needed a parabolic curve. Well, of course, I knew how to do all that from baseball. I mean, if you think about it, every projectile fired from a tank is the exact same math as a ball getting hit by a bat.
Yep.
Okay? It's a vector, 3D vector.
Yeah.
X, Y, Z value, velocity. And every single gaming tick, you add the velocity. And then what you do in the same tick, you subtract a microscopic little bit of velocity for air resistance, if you will.
Yeah, but how do you tell the unit where to shoot the bullet in the first place so that it knows where to aim?
Yeah. So what happens in a game like Total Annihilation is you have the player puts the cursor over a unit, and presumably, or you can do a forced attack on the ground, and the cursor knows the elevation at that point, so it has an XYZ value. And then what you do is you take the tip of the barrel. And I think we might have cheated and gone back to the turret, because the projectile is actually fired from down inside, but we only start rendering it when it's at the end of the barrel. And what you do is you end up with two XYZ values, and you do math, and the math is not trivial to compute the firing angle. It all comes down to what is the angle of the barrel. Now, if you follow military little bit of military know-how. Okay, this is so much fun because back in the old, like when they were like World War I, World War II, right? Artillery teams would have books, and they'd have books to aim the barrel depending on how far they wanted to shoot. They'd look it all up. They didn't have computers, so they'd look everything up manually. But what they discovered is projectiles were going further than they expected in some cases when they fired this big. I think the Germans were firing a big Bertha cannon against the French. It's because the projectile went so high into the atmosphere got thinner and didn't produce the resistance to the projectile shell, and the shell would miss its target by firing over the target.
Yeah.
So they weren't adjusting for density of atmosphere. So what did they do? They started taking into account the elevation that your gun was at, and then they would know the drop off, because eventually atmosphere drops off to nothing, right? It's a gradation, but it probably is not a linear gradation. It's a non-linear relationship as the atmosphere goes up. Okay. So, you could go really, really deep when you're calculating a projectile, but in Total Annihilation, we simplified it.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if we applied wind resistance, but it doesn't really matter. It wouldn't have been a much worse to do that, or much more complex. But at the end of the day, you take your XYZ and you compute an angle, and the barrel of the gun has to raise up, and when it's at the firing angle, the little script that is running inside of the unit fires the shell, and it just does its thing. So that's the dirty secret. It just does its thing. It's called, today, we call this emergent behavior. 25 years ago, 23 years ago, we called it simulation. But today, it's simulation plus emergent, because let's say there was an infantry bot there and you were going to try to shoot, and it's moving, and now your cannon fires, and maybe it's a big Bertha cannon in TA, and it misses because it lands where the infantry was.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen in Command and Conquer. When a gun fired, it always hit its target, because that wasn't happening at a simulation level. It was happening in a sort of a rock, paper, scissory kind of game, kind of just game logic. Hey, if that tank fires at that unit, it doesn't matter where it goes, it's going to hit it. Yep. It's going to hit it instantly. Everything's close quarters. And by the way, that whole system works when everything's jammed onto the screen. But when you've got a cannon firing clear across the map, you can't have it fire and then make something explode that's moved a screen away. That would look like shit, right?
Yeah.
So you've pretty much got to simulate it. And that was the key. That was the secret sauce to Total Annihilation. Simulation. We created the first video game that was simulating its combat that I knew of. Certainly somebody watching this could go, that's bullshit, Taylor. We had one back in 95 that did that. And I'll go, okay, fair enough.
But that's also visionary. That's a massive leap. And so is the 3D graphics in TA, because all the other RTSs weren't at the time, right? They're all flat pre-rendered
They
bitmaps.
were all pre-rendered bitmaps, best I can tell. And everybody probably thought on all those other design teams that if you render them with shitty little polygons, that the units will look like crap.
Yeah.
And it came down to design. I mean, the artists and the guys who modeled those units, Kevin Punn, who modeled the K-bots. By the way, they're called K-bots. I named them after Kevin, for Kevin bots.
Nice.
Those K-bots were masterpieces. Each one of them was their own cute little thing. And the Pee-wee with the dual reel plasma cannons was just its own little thing. Even though in reality, it probably would have been 25 feet high, which I always thought if there was a movie made about Total Annihilation, and it could be an opening scene where there was this giant war machine mech, and as the camera's slowly going up this steel structure, it goes past the name Pee-wee, right? And I always thought it'd be a lot of fun for kind of like an opening scene that something gigantic is called Pee-wee. Of course, movies have probably done that same stupid thing to death. You know how the guy who carries the big heavy machine gun in the war movies, they call him tiny,
junior or something.
yeah, junior or tiny, and you're like, okay, so hey, my friend Clayton, who was the lead artist on the project, would say something like, "No new ideas under the sun." Like it's really hard to come up with a new idea with a 7 billion people on the planet, all all spewing creativity. Well, not all of them, but you get what I mean. It's the internet is proof, right? I mean, it's hard to come up with something. If you think of an idea and search the internet, you could very easily find it.
Yeah, that's right. But with the TA stuff, you had the simulation, you had the 3D graphics, you had, it's really innovative.
You know what? I cannot argue with you, and not to just sort of, not as a brag, but as a fact.
Yeah.
We innovated on Total Annihilation, and so it's relevant to the FAF folks that are watching this. It all migrated into Supreme Commander. It all made that journey. Man, the sun is coming right in. It all just came into Supreme Commander. So it was the shift-click interface. Jeff Petkow was the driver behind that. The idea that you could start planning out your base before you had the resources to build it. So you're like a city planner. You're deciding, because I mean, in real life, you don't get $10 in your pocket and then order something. You order millions of dollars worth of military equipment, and then you get a bill, and then you pay the money, right? Like it's kind of like it's kind of the difference between mortgaging and buying in cash. I believe that you can mortgage a lot of things. You can get a loan and then pay it off over time, and that's not even a good analogy. It's a better analogy when you think about that was the thing, the metal and the energy model, which we took into Supreme Commander. But the metal and energy model of TA was, when you went to build something big and expensive, you didn't need all the cash up front. You could start the project, but then if you started too many, you were buttering the bread. You were taking the same butter and you were trying to spread it across too many pieces of bread, and nothing got built. And that was your shitty strategy, right? And you had to own that. You had, as a player, you're like, oh my God, I guess, like Hitler did that in World War II. He wanted secret weapon programs. He wanted hardened submarine bases. He wanted lots more he wanted a big tank. He wanted everything, right? And so what did they do? They took the dollars and they stretched them out, and people go back to World War II and they go, imagine if Hitler was smart enough to take the cash that he had, or the resources, which were in the form of people and food and oil and natural resources. And imagine if he spent it all on jets.
Yeah.
And he perfected the jet fighter. Then he could have dominated the skies with the jet fighter, but he spread it out all. He wanted more submarines. He wanted this. He wanted that. And he got a lot of, he basically, I mean, if your friend played an RTS game the way Hitler played World War II, you'd look over your friend's shoulder and say, you're a noob. You're a noob. You're going to get creamed. You think that's fair?
Yeah, and that's the sort of complexity that you brought to the game, all that stalling of economy. And that also brings the learning curve of Supcom, which is huge. It makes it hard to approach for a new player. And they just get crushed, absolutely crushed for such a long time. But it's that same complexity that we love that, that keeps us still playing it. And yeah, so let's talk about, you asked that question, why didn't people move along? And so I asked the question in the comments, and about 40 people responded. And I sent you those responses, but I'm not going to read them all out now because there's too many. But, if you just look for the common theme, in them all, which I have written down.
I can pull it up. I can pull it up too. I got those from you this morning, and I've been doing stuff all day. But I can.
The answers are all like the strategic zoom, the realistic graphics, whereas lots of the future games didn't have that. The complexity, the economy, it's not too clicky. So I think lots of people are talking about Starcraft, where it's too micro. So Supcom has made a lot of decisions that don't turn it into a micro festival. So that's a big thing. But then no one actually brought this up, but Jeff, or was it Jeff? someone made me realize that the game had really long legs because of decisions that you'd made. So there was the moddability of it, the fact that we can make our own maps. Those things keep us working on the game today. And because of that, we are injecting life into it and we can still play it. So I guess that's one of my questions is, like, those abilities would have had a cost, right? It was more expensive to make the game so that we can make our own maps. It was more expensive to make the game so that we can write our own mods. What was the business justification for putting that in?
Well, I'll tell you, on Total Annihilation, it started on Total Annihilation. And it started on Total Annihilation because when I did baseball games, once again, you could, in Hardball 2, you could go in to the editor that I provided with the game, and you could create your own baseball team.
Yep.
Now, I got to tell you, I could talk for hours about this. I'm going to try to be really concise. We did not have a license for the MLBPA. So we were not allowed to ship Hardball 2 with all the big players of the day. So we knew that if we shipped a game and we had an editor, okay, you, the player, or the person who bought the game, rather, not the baseball player, but the game player, would go into the editor and you could enter in any name you liked. And
Right.
you could enter in all the accurate stats for whoever, Ken Griffey, whoever was the player of the day.
Yeah.
And there was no violation. There was no violation, right, on us. Like, I say that like we were almost committing a crime by giving. But I mean, if you want to go buy a 3D art program and you want to model a Star Wars character, right? Nobody's going to jail for that, right? It's your own private entertainment experience, right? So we knew this. Well, that would mean that when the engine ran, the Hardball 2 engine ran, it would load up the data. It didn't care. It just loaded up the stats, the batting average. You want to put the batting average at 1,000, so every time the player swings the ball, the ball is hit. That's up to you. I didn't police.
So that makes sense for the baseball game. But what about did Total Annihilation have the modding as well?
So when I sat down to write the engine for Total Annihilation, and I would go to load the units into memory, I was like, well, I'm not going to hard code any of this stuff. So of course, all this stuff's going to just be loaded from a data file.
Yep.
And then I knew, because other games had 3 factions or 4 factions, I was like, I don't know how many factions we're going to have. Maybe we're going to have more factions.
Yep.
So I would make it so that it would go to the hard drive and it would just go to the folder where the data was stored, and it would say, well, how many factions are there? And I would load whatever was there, and I would present that as an option. So it was all data driven. So at the end of the day, I built the engine to be data driven, and this made it really easy. And so Ron Gilbert and I were talking one day, and he said to me, I think he gets credit for this. He said, although my memory is fuzzy, let's face it. I mean, it's hard to say. Something like, we could release new units every once in a while. We could release them every month or whatever. And we decided, what if we release them every week? And he was like, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but it ended up being a massive responsibility. Because you had Christmas and holidays, and you had to have somebody to release the unit. You couldn't just shirk on that, because that was a big deal. So that data-driven release new content model basically meant the game had to be moddable. Well, the maps were already moddable because you loaded a map. You can't store all the maps in memory, so they had to be moddable. All you had to do is release a map editor, and I don't think we did release a map editor.
No, that a guy called Hazard X made one, and I think some devs from your side helped him understand the file format, and then he just built it himself. And then subsequently, the FAF community, a guy called Ozone X. I didn't realize that. They both have an X in it, don't they? But he made his own map editor as well.
Yeah, so you get the way this whole thing works. You learn how to do something on a game. For me, it went back to baseball, which, by the way, I'm not a baseball fan at all, but I'm like, what the hell? I did my job, and I enjoyed it as much as I could. And then it migrated up, and it drove the architectural decisions, because it's an architecture. It's code architecture.
Yeah.
If you ask somebody to add a feature like make a game moddable, and the game is already written, it's not been architected, it's a nightmare. It's really, really hard to make something work that way. So basically, long story short, is we found out that moddable games wasn't that hard to do, and it was really popular with people. So when we started Gas Powered Games, I was like, well, we're going to make this moddable. And we made Dungeon Siege moddable. And by the way, that was a failure in a lot of ways, even though it truly was moddable. Because an RPG is not like an RTS. And I'll tell you why. Because if I create a new sword, or a new piece of armor, or a new monster, there is a whole progression from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And if you were to, like, let's say you were to create a character, a monster that was in the middle level of a 60-hour game, and then you told your friend, hey, Carl, I want you to play Dungeon Siege and see if you can encounter my monster 30 hours in. He'll go, no,
Right.
that's not okay.
Yeah.
You basically have to commit to creating an entire RPG game again.
Right.
All the monsters, all the levels, and a guy did, and we hired him. His name's Brian Fricks. We actually hired him because he built an entire new game with the Dungeon Siege assets, and it was another like 20 or 30 hours of the gameplay. It was like, how did you do this, Brian? So we hired him. Well, back to RTS, it's a perfect place to make mods because you can mod a map, you can make a new map, and then play it with all the units and gameplay rules and everything on that map. You could create a new unit, and it could be a tier 3 unit, and it's like, we'll just play one game, an hour-long game, 2-hour game, and you're going to see my unit show up. So it's perfect.
Yeah, it's more casual, isn't it? So the sort of the contributions are much more accessible.
They're more atomic, you know, and I hope that explanation is valuable to understand, for folks to understand that not every game just should be moddable. You just don't make a game moddable. You couldn't make a game like, Uncharted moddable. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? You really, all you can do is make your own story and make your own whole brand new game. But an RTS is like the perfect sandbox to build cool moddable shit.
This is an interesting idea, but did you guys ever consider using your engine to create other RTSs that weren't Supreme Commander? Like, you could have had a more micro one without strategic zoom. Like, you could have made a Starcraft competitor. You could have made a Command and Conquer competitor, because you had lots of assets, you had maps, you had engine that would work, and it would just be about shipping out the content, right?
We did. In fact, over the years, we had a game working with I won't disclose the confidentiality of it, but it was a game that we were working with a Japanese company to take one of their horror-themed games and make a horror-themed RTS game. And we prototyped it, and they came into hard times, and they canceled it. And I got to tell you, it was damn cool. You were running around with a group of characters, RTS style, taking on hordes and hordes of zombies, and it was amazing, and it was visually spectacular. We also did Demigod. We used Supreme Commander engine to make Demigod. So there was a different kind of game. There was a MOBA style game, close, without any of the typical RTS mechanics. Worked beautifully for Demigod. Demigod is a conversation unto itself. We also had a game called Kings and Castles that I started to fund out of my own pocket, or the company's pocket, no publisher, and we almost signed it up with a publisher, but we got the opportunity to work on Age of Empires Online with Microsoft. And times were really tough back then, and we wanted to work with somebody who was going to pay their bills.
Yeah. So that was another question: is what happened to that game? Because the last I heard is the blog was going to continue later.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? It was a disaster from a handling. I really failed. That was one of my first, it's almost like, a Hollywood movie star gets picked up for a DUI and they're holding that card in the police lineup or whatever, the police shot. And you're like, I like that guy in the last movie. Now he's a drunk, like I really felt like I failed hardcore. Like I was going to come back, but I got working on Age of Empires Online. Then that got canceled after we were sort of thinking, and then the industry just was not recovering. I did not have the money to continue Kings and Castles. But where I failed, where I feel like I was the idiot who failed, was I did not message properly to the community that were following along. But at the same time, millions and millions of people bought Supreme Commander and Dungeon Siege. There were like 22,000 people watching the video blog for Kings and Castles. So if you look at it from a pure eyeball, like pure how many people are following along on this, 20-something thousand people is not even I mean, it sounds like a lot of people, but it's not like those folks were going to provide enough economic strength to drive a business, right? I mean,
yeah, so you didn't have the financial justification to continue with the project.
It didn't have the
fine.
financial
That's just
justification.
business.
But here's why I'm upset with myself over that. This is about as truthful as I think I can be. I failed to let those 20-something thousand people know what was going on. I really should have just made a video and said, hey guys, it's me. Here's what's happened. This isn't catching on. This isn't financially interesting, and I got to feed all these people. But that story got old. I mean, telling people you have to make payroll, telling people you've got to pay rent, that story just got old. People who are on the other end of consuming a game, they're in the store, they're picking up a box, they're looking at it, they're wondering if they want to spend the $50. They don't care about your payroll. They don't care about health insurance. They don't care about what it costs to run a business and keep the pop machine full or buy chairs for people. They don't care about all that shit. And I was such an open book. I would tell people all of this stuff, and nobody was listening. And then when Kings and Castles thing happened, I went, just forget it, dude. Forget it. The bottom line is that I was not a successful businessman. I was a successful game designer. I was a game designer trying to run a business, and I needed a business guy or a person, fairly. I needed a business person who would be the tough business end. And I didn't have the trust in people because business people kind of, once they control your bank account and all the money, there's all sorts of bad shit that can happen when you hand the keys of the kingdom over to somebody and you trust them.
All right, this is like getting really interesting now. So let's talk about the end of.
I thought you were going to say it's getting terrible.
Let's talk about the end of GPG, because I don't know. I know you've had the Wildman Kickstarter, and I always feel bad that I never donated to that. But
don't feel bad. It's
why
okay.
am I interested in that? I'm interested. You said you're not a good businessman, but you did grow GPG. You had multiple teams running. You started with just like one title, and you grew it into many. You shipped all that. You got the pitches through. You got the funding for lots of projects. It didn't all go well, and I guess the question is, at what point did it fall apart? Because for a while there, it was looking pretty good.
Well, there was something happening. It's kind of like there was a sea change in the business. First of all, retail was starting to see the end of retail. That's when Steam started to come in. Traditional publishers were chasing console. They were chasing console like you wouldn't believe. 120 million installed base for PS2, 120 million for this. There was Nintendo. So there were hundreds of millions of console players, and PC was seen as the redheaded stepchild. In fact, I will tell you a true story at risk of maybe being frowned upon, is that when Electronic Arts had the Supreme Commander 1.0 contract, they canceled it. They canceled it after about, I don't know what it was, 6 months, 7 months. It might have even been a year in. And I was told by an Electronic Arts executive, they said, Chris, the PC is a boutique business. And I quote word for word, the PC is a boutique business. Now, you know what he means, that executive meant by boutique?
He meant it's small and specialized.
It's like it's a hot dog stand in in a sea of supermarkets.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna make enough money at your boutique business. Like when you go to the mall and you can get a key made at a kiosk. You're not gonna make any money there.
And I guess that's how they still see RTS. Maybe like PC games, people wouldn't say that anymore, but with RTS, it's always going to be small, isn't it? Relative.
Yeah. And guess what happened after that executive said that?
What?
Console went into the shitter and PC gaming went to the next level.
Nice.
right? And it happened over many, many years, but it went the other way. It went the other way. And that Electronic Arts started Origin. Gabe then went on to become one of the most successful video game publishing platform entrepreneurs, businessmen in the world and in history. Gabe Newell is the most successful video game entrepreneur. Okay?
I missed where he fell into the story. What did he have to? Was he?
Well, he built Steam. They built Steam.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Right? Right? What's Steam worth? It's a private company. If Steam was on the stock market today, it would be worth twice as much money as Electronic Arts and Activision.
Yeah, right.
Okay? The revenue that they generate for their headcount is off the scales.
Yeah.
Completely off the scales.
Pretty nice because they get like 30% of every sale on the Steam store or something like that. So billions,
and those big publishers are selling their games on his platform.
Yeah.
So those people that were competing with him, by the way, now they're handing him 30%.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's nice. So EA canceled because of the boutiquiness. Is that why? They just didn't see
Yeah, they didn't want to be in a boutique business like PC gaming. They didn't want to be in PC gaming. And you know what I said to that? I said, well, I understand that. And we went and we signed with THQ. And THQ was a kind of an up-and-comer, and they were really good to us. But previously to that, THQ had actually been kind of dealing with a lot more like family and kids games that were kind of a smaller marketplace, and they were breaking out. I mean, THQ stood for literally toy headquarters.
How did you find them in the first place? Like, how did you know that there was an opportunity there?
Well, I was pretty visible in the industry after Total Annihilation and Dungeon Siege. I had a high visibility, and that visibility meant that a lot of people would come talk to me at trade shows. I would literally give a talk on some subject, RTS or RPG, and at the end of the talk, the business development people would all come up and hand me their business card.
Right.
It's literally when you're in opposite land and you're not having to pick up the phone and cold call, your phone is ringing off the hook.
Yeah, and that's a reason why you could sell Supreme Commander, is because you're kind of a brand onto yourself. People know your name, and if it's the new Chris Taylor RTS, then that's news, right?
Yeah, it was a good time. I would say I was literally at the zenith of my career. I was absolutely at the peak. I didn't know I was at the peak, but I was at the peak. And it kind of actually went downhill from there because RTS lost popularity slowly but surely. PC gaming was going to the next level where you had to have bigger and bigger budgets or you had smaller budgets. You couldn't live in the $5 to $15 million zone. You had to be a big franchise to get to the next level, or you had to be a little franchise where it just cost no money. So if you had a studio that had between 50 and 150 people, and you had a big office overhead, you had people with benefits that had been around a long time, you were kind of in the dead zone. There was this real dead zone. It was really tough. It was really weird. And that, so you wanted to know what happened.
Yeah, so to GPG, how did it end?
GPG. So what happened was, and maybe people didn't like me. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a saying that I coined, and I said, nobody wants to work with an asshole. So if you're an asshole, don't expect people to line up at the door for you. Now, I didn't think I was an asshole, but maybe I was. Maybe people at the end of the day didn't like me because I was cocky. Maybe they didn't like me because I was too vulgar, because I am a kind of a vulgar person. I do curse a lot, you know? My Canadian roots. I like to drop a lot of F-bombs and talk a lot of smack, you know? Yeah. I got to tell you, though, I wasn't as bad as a lot of the guys were, but I think that there's some truth to the fact that I was a little rough around the edges.
So did what? Like key people left? Is that what the issue was?
No, never lost any key people. My team and I, we were like the Riders of Rohan. I mean, we went into battle and just slayed. I mean, technically we were just on fire for years and years. There was no problem, but maybe publishers were more, they were publicly traded. Maybe they didn't want a guy like me in front of the media talking a lot of crazy, because I would talk a lot of crazy shit in front of the media. You know, there's a lot of editing going on when I had interviews, and there was a lot of editing going on video. Now,
Yeah, so
imagine
maybe like
this,
a loose cannon type of
a little bit
situation.
of a loose cannon, maybe.
Yeah, you just need a
Yeah.
PR team, right?
Well, the PR team would be like, "Are you ready for this guy?"
Here's your flak jacket.
And the thing is I was like, "What are you talking about? This is the way the gut. This is my audience. My audience digs this shit, right?"
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I was on the same level with my audience, but above me in the publishing realm, there were a bunch of suits, and they were serious. They
Yeah.
had to manage Wall Street, and Wall Street didn't want this. Now today, with Netflix and HBO and Jesus, PewDiePie, if we were to measure me on the Richter scale,
Yeah.
okay, I don't even show up
Yeah.
compared to
That's right.
PewDiePie.
That's right.
I mean, I wasn't talking to the press and going, look at this fucking strategic zoom. I mean, you could really fuck people up with this fucking shit. You know, this is fucking awesome. Like, I wasn't doing that, right? I wasn't doing that. I was clean.
Yeah.
I was clean. But back 20 years ago or 15 years ago, they were pretty
Straight-laced.
conservative and straight. And I was the country boy who told it like it was. And that wasn't probably good for GPG.
So you think the fall of GPG was really down to an inability to get new publishing deals to stay alive? And
It really did. It
maybe
really did.
that was a personality thing, but we don't know that, right? That's
We
just
don't know that.
You're theorizing that.
You know what? People who know me, if they happen to watch this video, will say, "Taylor, you're selling yourself short." I hear a lot of that. I'm pretty hard on myself, but I will tell you, if I could do it all again, I don't think I'd change anything. And it's really important to live your life that way. Don't look in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Play the game your way. You know, screw everyone else who doesn't want to play with you in that game and go forward and do whatever the hell you want. You know what? If you compromise that and you're living in your big mansion and you're sitting there sipping your umbrella drink with your whatever, and you said, "Yeah, but I had to kind of sell my soul to the devil to do it. I wasn't me." That sucks worse. That sucks worse.
Yeah. We need to start a channel of game design / RTS / self-help. We're kind of like going through it all.
Is that what this is now?
It's becoming that.
Should I lay down on the couch? And is your rate the same as it was last time? Is it $300 an hour?
Yeah, that's American dollars.
And you can ask me, "So tell me more about your mother."
Yeah, but with the once again with the GPG thing, I assumed Supcom 2 not having the result that was expected, which I assumed, like, was it a financial success? Supcom 2?
Super Commander 2 sold. I think it ended up selling a couple of million units all total. But yeah, I mean, on retail and Steam.
Yeah.
I think it did fine. I think it sold about as much as Supreme Commander 1. I don't think there's an issue there.
Financially it was good. It was just the critically less well received than Supcom.
Yeah, we got panned a little bit early on because we did goof up some controls, which we patched right away. We did actually make a genuine control error, if anybody remembers that. But we fixed it, and you know, in the end, there were people who said, "I prefer Supreme Commander 2 better." Like, there was a division of it was like a thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's fair," because it was pretty cool. We had flow field pathfinding in Supreme Commander 2. We didn't have it yet in Supcom 1, and flow field pathfinding is the bomb. I mean, I'm sorry, that saying's probably out of date by now. What would you say? It's the shit? It's not the shits, it's the shit.
I still say the bomb. That's fine.
You say the bomb still?
Yeah,
okay, man. Good. All right. Well, you can. We'll stay with the bomb.
Yeah.
And you know, when you look at the technical innovations in the map, the height of the map, where you could see down into the crevasse and the shit would explode and fall down into the world. I mean, it was visually spectacular, and we had the unit cannon, the Noah unit cannon. I named that after my second son, and the one firing. You know, and I got to tell you something. I've never told this to anybody. I don't think. But the Noah unit cannon was an idea that Ron Gilbert had on Total Annihilation. He said, wouldn't it be cool if you could shoot peewees across the map? So I'm sitting there at 3 a.m, coming up with ideas. I'm like, Ron had that really great idea about shooting units. So I put that in there. And the guys like look at me like, are you fucking kidding me? But how cool was it to see it? So and then the casing comes off as it flies through the air. That's some cool shit. Give Ron a shout out to Ron. One thing I will say to you, creating a really great game is not the work of one person, okay? It's the work of a team. And it's not a team of 5 or 6 designers. It's the engineers. It's the artists. It's the sound design. It's the production people. It's the scripters. It's the testers that come back with feedback. It's the publishing side people who are into it. I know it sounds like I'm doing the feel-good shit right now, but let me tell you something. Because my name was on the box, it doesn't mean that I invented and created everything, right? I was the ringleader. I chose the ideas. I directed. I'm essentially a director. I was the creative director and designer. And yes, I can take credit if I want for picking and choosing the right things. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a great team, you got nothing. Yeah. You got nothing if you don't have a great team. And I always had a great team of people to work with. So this interview, I want to make a real shout out to those folks wherever they are. God bless them, each one of them off in their own, taking their career, all in different directions, doing their thing. They all made huge contributions and are to be and to collect their slice of the credit, if you will.
Cool. Yeah. And thank you from us as well. Fortunately, it's forever.
I hope those, and you're very welcome. And that's you're welcome from the team.
Yeah.
So.
And where did Ron fit into that? Who is Ron?
Oh well, Ron Gilbert Ron Gilbert is the creator of. He worked at LucasArts and he created a game called Maniac Mansion. And so to do that, he created this thing called the scripting utility for Maniac Mansion, which was Scum. And then he started a company later on called Humongous Entertainment. Humongous Entertainment, okay, was where I built Total Annihilation, where we built Total Annihilation.
I thought it was Cave Dog.
It was Cave Dog, because I'll tell you a quick story if you want, for fans of. We had so I was there about a year, and we were going to ship the game hopefully in a year, but we knew we were going to take some more time. We ended up spending about 20 months. Okay, unbeknownst to me, Ron and Shelley, the owners of Humongous, were going to sell the company to GT Interactive, and they needed a name for the group that they needed to kind of have. They needed to put names on things. And so Ron said, I think it was Ron that said, the GT people are going to be coming out. We need a name for the group. And I had this name, I'd come up with this name called Frozen Yak. And it was I'm all about the visual, right? The yak walks onto the screen, and then there's like a snowstorm or an ice storm, and the yak freezes, and it freezes, and that's like a movie intro, right? And it was called, then it would be Frozen Yak, and then a hammer or something would hit it, it would shatter, and then you hear a voice from off screen go, "What did you do to my yak?" Okay, it was just stupid, right? It was just stupid. So I'm talking like this for like a week, and I was telling people around the office, what about this idea where there's a yak and it's frozen and all this? And everybody's like, that sounds really good. Well, then I went home one night and I came in and I said, hey, I got another idea. And I said this to Clayton. I said, what about Cave Dog? I've been doing this animal thing, this like animal thing. And I came up with Cave Dog. And he went, oh, that's great. So Ron walks into the office and Ron goes, okay, we need a name. Okay, guys, what is it? And I go, well, we got Frozen Yak that everybody really likes. And we've got Cave Dog that everybody really likes. And he goes, okay. And he takes a coin out of his pocket and he goes, heads, it's Cave Dog. Tails, it's Frozen Yak. Flips it, lands on the floor. It was Cave Dog. And then Clayton went home and he drew a logo of the stone tablet with the dog. And he composed, because he's a composer, he composed the cool drum beat, the caveman drum beat of the Cave Dog logo. And that was it. History was made. We designed that whole thing, and that all emerged in 24 hours.
Right.
Instead of spending
Yeah. So you worked with him, and then you spun out Cave Dog from that company.
We
to
didn't
be
spin it out. It was a brand. It was a brand. See, here's the thing. Humongous Entertainment was a kids company. It made kids software. Total Annihilation was an adult game, a harder core game for adults. So
Yeah.
we couldn't put it to market under the Humongous name because parents would come in who bought Putt Putt or Freddy Fish or Pajama Sam, and they'd go, "Oh, Total Annihilation." It would hurt the brand. It would hurt the kids' brand, and it wouldn't make sense. So we knew we needed an adult, call it an adult brand, but it was really a normal video game brand.
Right.
And in those days, brands were just silly. It was all about a silly name.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. So he had a lot to do with Total Annihilation getting built in the
Ron was
first
an
place.
integral part. Ron was a very important part of the team.
And
Total
he was
Annihilation.
one of the founders of the company, and you were the lead designer. So that wasn't really your title. That was like in an ownership. You didn't own that title.
No, I didn't own it. And that's one of the reasons why I left to start my own company, because I wanted to own my own creative work.
Cool.
And it was a bittersweet time. I have to tell you, it was a tough time. As much as I wanted to stay, I didn't see a future building games. And then of course, Humongous went broke, or not went broke, but GT Interactive, who took over and started running them, arguably did a poor job and ran that company into the ground.
Yeah.
There's probably an extenuating circumstances, like children's software sales stopped being popular.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you hear about children's games these days?
On iPads. I got a small child, so I hear a little bit. But
yeah, well, they came back with apps, right, on the iPhone, sure.
Yeah.
But not like the point and click adventures of the Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam quality. Those were the golden years. The golden years. I can't emphasize enough that was a moment in time. Anyway, I apologize if I went off on tangents. You feel free to edit this down.
Yeah, I'm not going to edit it because people complain so much when I edit. But what I do is I write a table of contents for everything we talk about, and people can just skip to the section they care about. So, for some people, that's really interesting, and for other people, it's not. So I think we should just talk about what we want to talk about, and they can work out what they bloody watch. It's not my problem.
Okay, sounds good.
It also
I appreciate it.
It also takes hours to edit those videos. I think like one I spent 16 hours on, and that's not including the time to watch it, and it's a 3-hour video. So, it takes a long time.
Yeah, it's too much.
So yeah, but with the GPG shutting down, even if you couldn't get the publishing funds, but also you didn't make the money from the titles themselves, because if any of those titles had been a bit more successful, you would have had money in the bank, right? So I know from one of your other interviews that I saw that
never got a royalty check.
Yeah, because you just didn't get enough sales, right? Eventually you would have, but there's like that critical mass.
You got to know how the math works in the business back then. It's changed since. It's changed, but they took the model when Trip Hawkins founded Electronic Arts. This is a little bit of video game history. Trip Hawkins founded Electronic Arts with the idea that a video game designer and his and the team that worked with them were like a rock band. They were electronic artists, like instead of recording artists.
Yeah.
And the games actually came out of Electronic Arts back in the early 80s in little sleeves, like albums, like you would get an LP or a single in. And you could open it up. You would actually open it up just like you would open up an LP, and you'd see a story, a bio of the team. Like it wouldn't just be all about the game, Star Control or Star whatever. It would show a picture of the team, right? Yeah. It's actually a really cool concept. So Trip Hawkins was really doing something kind of on the one hand, kind of visionary and but it wasn't completely visionary. He was just taking it from the music industry. But he made a terrible mistake which hurt those electronic artists. He used the payment scheme of the way a band would be paid. Okay? So let's say you write a song in the 70s, and you're at home with a bunch of your friends in the garage, and you come up with this cool song, and a label decides that they're going to record it. So what would they do? They would take you into a studio. And the studio isn't cheap. It's got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of high-end equipment. And what they would do is they would say to the band, look, this studio is going to cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to record this album. It's going to be recorded beautifully. And then we're going to go out and we're going to promote you. We're going to spend a ton of money on marketing. We're going to manufacture albums and distribute them to music stores all over. And we're going to pay people, salespeople, marketing people, executives, administrative people. And it's going to cost us millions. Okay? And you're this young guy in a band, and you go, hey, it's all good to me, right? Because I want to be famous. I want to be on stage in front of millions of people, or whatever, do rock concerts in front of the world. So you agree. And then you find out that your album has gone and sold, 2 million copies. Okay? And the way it works is you get a royalty back. You get a royalty on every album sold. Maybe you get 20%. The band gets 20%. And so let's say those albums are $10 each, and there's 5 million sold. So there's $50 million, and you get 10% of it. You get 5 million of it. But they don't write you a check for $5 million. They say, well, we've got to subtract all of the costs, and you've got to pay it back. But you've got to pay it back at your royalty rate, not out of the gross contributions. Mm-hmm. So if your royalty rate is 10%, you have to pay back all the money that they spent on all those people, the manufacturing, the marketing, whatever. It all comes out of your 5 million. Okay? So if you take, now let's talk real numbers. Now that I've given you the background. Trip Hawkins founded Electronic Arts using that model. And people in the early days hardly spent any money distributing and marketing and manufacturing. So there wasn't any money it was called the recoup. There was hardly any money to recoup. So, okay, if you made a game and you sold 150,000 copies, let's say you were Doug Smith, and you made a game called Lode Runner, and you did it with Broderbund. And Broderbund, let's say, had that model because they were copying Electronic Arts' model. See, Electronic Arts created the model, and it spread to the whole industry.
Right.
That's an important detail.
Yeah.
Well, you probably got a check for a couple of $100,000 right away. And then, wow, you're a 20-year-old kid or an 18-year-old kid, and you're just thrilled, right? And then you go and you get another check the next month or the next quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter, and you're like, wow, I'm rich. Well, or you're doing really well. Okay, now imagine you're Chris Taylor, and you start a company called Gas-Powered Games, and you do a deal with Microsoft. And the deal is that you get 14% on Dungeon Siege. And you go and you sell 1 million copies. And so the game ends up generating $30 million after these deductions and revenue. I have to, then the 14%, it grows over time. It grew to 18% and then 24%. So those are the royalty rates that I got over time. Okay. Well, I had to recoup all the advances that were spent on the game out of my royalty rate before I received any cash. So at the end of about a $30 million gross revenue, I had barely paid off the $6-something million plus all the expenses, which were probably double that, $12 million. I had barely got to paying that money off. So basically, I got no royalty.
Yeah. So the your 19% covered the expense of the game.
Yeah. So if you took the average, let's say the average was 20%.
Yeah.
At $30 million, at 20%, you got to $6 million, and the game cost $6.3 million to make.
Right. So
you're still 300 grand underwater. Now, the reason I added all that marketing expense stuff, because that gets a lot of that stuff, though it is covered on the publishing side, what they'll do is they'll deduct a bunch of costs off the reach. So if the game sells for $50, they have cost of goods, and they have the retailer's piece, and they have insurance and freight and returns, and they do a lot of deductions like that. But I do believe, if I recall, that my recoup was on the core development advances. And I had to cover returns. So if the store is like Costco, ordered a shitload of the boxes and they shipped them all back. And they did, by the way. They did. Costco over-ordered Dungeon Siege and they had them in a pile.
Right.
They didn't sell to that Costco audience, so they shipped them all back to Microsoft. So
Great.
I had to cover all the return shipping costs. Came out of my piece of the pie.
But you didn't get to decide that they got it in the first place.
I was not part of the executive decision to ship them all those. And because I would have said, that doesn't sound like a good idea. So I had to absorb all that. So at the end of the day, we made a 1 million unit selling game and we got 0.
But you financed the production of an amazing game.
Yeah, we blood, sweat, and tears. We worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I shit you not, that's not an exaggeration, for 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years. Sometimes 14-hour days.
But that's just the nature of the beast, right? That's a problem with going to a publisher. And like that's inescapable. Is it inescapable? Unless you're making an indie game?
Yeah, it's inescapable if you don't have your own money and you're not making an indie game. It was inescapable in the 90s. It was a 90s problem. In the 2000s, it was less of a problem, but it was a big problem probably throughout. Well, I would say it was still a big problem through most of the 2000s. The last decade, it has changed. But you know what? I'm kind of done with it.
Right.
I'm not doing that. I'm almost, you know what? I'm almost kind of telling you that I'm in a mode where if I can't make games out of my own bank account, I'm not making them.
Why is that?
Because I don't want to have any part of the old. I don't want to do the publishing thing.
Is it the stress or the size of the project is too hard, or
No, I don't want to partner. I don't want to create a partnership with a company that I can't manage and control. I just don't. And plus, I'm older now. I mean, it's no secret that I'm not. I mean, I made games for 30 years. 30 years.
Yeah.
Right. It's like imagine if you're a hockey player for 30 years. It's kind of a young man's or a young person's game.
No, it's
you
not.
know.
It's
so
the godfather of RTS's game. That's his game.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, that's right. You want a cappuccino? Huh? Hey, can we get a couple of cappuccinos over here? And then I'm going to shoot you. But you know what? Hey, yeah, that's fine. Finish your cappuccino first.
Yeah.
Jimmy, take Mike for a drive. Don't forget to shovel like last time.
So is it because you want control? If you team up with a publisher, you're not the captain of the ship.
Well, truthfully, today, you might not even get a publisher to look at you sideways because there is a million people out there who are willing to work, who are willing to, and this is kind of a complicated subject, but let's try. When you're making games for 15 to 25-year-olds, okay, it's like a band making music for 15 to 25-year-olds. You kind of got to be 15 to 25. When I was in my heyday making games, I was the ages of 20 to 45, let's say. I was making games for people my age. And as I got along in the business, I made games, and it worked. RTS games were kind of a 30-something. It was a lot of people in their 30s who really enjoyed that level of sophistication. So I really moved with my audience. I was able to run with them for a while, but now I'm frankly getting too old. It's just one of those things. And I'm still full of shit, to be fair. But
so you think you're not interested in the RTSs the way you used to be, not as a 30-year-old?
No, it's that my design sensibilities are going to be for a smaller and smaller group. Okay, so there's a 53-year-old. I'm 53. There's a 53-year-old guy out there who's going to love what I'm doing with Intergalactic Space Empire.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But my audience is fixed, and it's getting smaller.
Yeah, so you're getting more specialized in what you want to do.
Right.
And it's not going to be attractive to a publisher.
It's not going to be attractive to a publisher. They're not going to want to spend millions of dollars. They're not going to want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars because hundreds of thousands of dollars isn't interesting to them. They want to invest millions of dollars on something that is going to be like a Fortnite, which is crazy, right? Because there's already a Fortnite. But publishers are like fish. They move in schools. They chase trends. It's like if you turn on Netflix and there's a hit show on Netflix, there's 10 other production companies pitching Reed Hastings on another show that's just like that.
Yeah. No, I get that. So
that's the process.
So you're not interested? You're just not really interested in making another Supreme Commander.
Well, you know, it's like, okay, like if somebody was out there listening, right, and they really thought that making another Supreme Commander, like it was, and they wanted to write a check, it would be a $25 to $35 million check. They'd have to have $25 to $35 million. And you go, really? Really? Yes, really. That's how expensive it is. Okay?
So you are interested. You just need the proper financing.
Well, they'd have to be able to write the check and then say that I don't have only 18 months to make it. Or, oh, by the way, I don't have to make it for I don't have to make the Braille version of it. You know what I mean? Like all these qualifiers to weigh it down. Oh, and by the way, it's got to, you've got to hire my cousin, Carl. He's going to be the co-designer on it. You're like, like all these caveats, right? So with what I'm doing with Kanugi and with Intergalactic Space Empire is complete freedom to make a game for my audience.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it takes a long time, by the way, because that's just me. And then I do it at my pace. I don't have anybody. And then when I finally make the game live, and it generates $1 in revenue, I pay a fee to a PayPal. I pay a small fee. I don't pay 30% to Gabe. You know what I mean? I pay it. Most of it goes back to me and my guys. Yep. Right. So I'm not done with games. I'm done with the gaming industry as the way they operate. Even though they're doing way better today, I wouldn't get a job in game design because I can't design games for 20-year-olds anymore. I don't relate. My 14-year-old upstairs, he and I don't see eye to eye on game design. And he's the future, right? So I can teach him game design, the basics, and he can go on and have a career in game design if he wants. And I think he'd do quite well. But I won't be playing his games, and he probably won't be playing my games. There's a generation gap for sure.
Yeah, but don't you think that if you make 10 more of your super specialized games, one of them is going to hit, and that's what the publishers are looking for? Aren't they not looking for that next breakout game?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, but why are you not right? The reason that you may not be right is because those publishers are now young people as well. They're not a bunch of 50-year-old guys. And 25 and 30-year-old guys at publishers, guys and girls, and kids of all ages, they don't hire 53-year-old guys. 53-year-old guys creep them out. It weirds them out. I'll tell you why. There's the truth. This is the truth. This is a truth moment. When I was running Gas Powered Games and I was like 31, 32, and I had an old guy walk in who had a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and he was 20 years older than me, I went, nope, don't need an old guy telling me what to do. It's like your dad. Like having your dad come into your special place, your world, and telling you that you're wrong about a bunch of stuff, because that would invariably happen, right? Hey, we should do this. You hired me, right? Because you wanted my experience and my knowledge. I'm telling you, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. But you don't know games, man. You don't know games. So once you're moved out of the system, the only way you stay in the system is if you're an executive at a publishing company. Executives at publishing companies can be 50-odd years old all day long.
Right.
But you can't be on the development and the design side of a game company and be hired by a publisher. They won't do it. So I know this now. I'm okay with it. I've accepted it, and I'm going to make my games my own way, on my own pace. And I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah. I think some publishers go for like more exotic games, like the Hearts of Iron games. They're like really specialized, brutally complicated. Plus the older market is getting bigger and bigger all the time, right? Because all the people like me who used to be 10-year-old gamers, now we're 40-year-old gamers. And it used to be that games were a thing that children did, but now there are 40-year-old gamers. So
are you 40?
I'm 38. Yeah.
Wow, you are the youngest 38-year-old. I mean, I swear to God, you're doing good. I don't know what you're eating. You're getting good regular exercise.
Mainly beer, actually. Yeah.
What's that?
Mainly beer. That's what I'm
Mainly
making.
beer. You're drinking
Yeah.
your beer. Good,
Yeah.
good for you. You're making sure you drink your 5 pints of beer every day.
Yeah.
No, seriously, you look like you're 30. You look like 31. You don't look 38. So congratulations for your. I think everybody looks better. I don't look 50. Do I look 53?
Not a bit.
Yeah, I'm 54 in a couple months.
Damn.
Like, what the hell is happening?
I
Must
think
be
we,
something.
man, like everything I'm hearing says we better hurry up and get this Supcom 3 underway before you're too old for it.
Well, tell you what, if I can license back my engine, Square Enix owns the game engine, and they would have to license that to this future company that wants to make another game. Now, if Square Enix is watching this, and Square Enix wants to step up to the plate and they own the IP and they want me to build Supreme Commander 3, then by all means pick up the phone and call me. At the very, very least, what I could do is I could creatively guide the team. And I can tell you right now, to make Supreme Commander 3 is not an exercise in creativity, okay? It's an exercise in listening to the community. It's really, if age has taught me anything, you have to learn how to listen. Okay?
So what, are you saying that other people will come up with a lot of the ideas and you just need to sort of follow them?
It's half the design is just literally making the improvements. It's like imagine you were to go buy if you love Porsches and you were going to make the next Porsche, right? You don't want to redesign the whole car. You want to take everything that's great about every car that's been built, and you want to say, okay, now let's apply a few modern. We want Bluetooth, right? We want this, we want that. Like you don't have to. When you're extending a franchise, the worst thing you can do is overthink it. Like if I were to make Total Annihilation 2, I would damn near make Total Annihilation 1 again in HD with all of the problems fixed, and then add a couple more factions. Like that would be it. And add strategic zoom, add a bunch of the cool things. But you wouldn't have to do very much to make a sequel to Total Annihilation.
So that was something that you just said that I wanted to talk about, is you would license back the engine. Do we really want the engine of Supcom? Don't we want to build a new one for today's hardware?
Then you're back into your $25 to $35 million price tag, and I'll explain why. Okay, if you really want to crack this nut, I'll give you the start on it. Okay, you need a team. You can't snap your fingers and get a team. You got to build a team. To build a team takes a long, long time. Every 10 people you hire, probably 6 or 7 of them aren't going to stay. So you have to do that, and that takes time. That takes years. So you have to have enough money to be able to run this company long enough to build your team. Okay. Now, if you have the existing engine, now you can plug shit into the engine, and the team kind of can get by because they got structure.
Yeah.
But if you're going to build a new engine from scratch, you're going to need a top-notch group of people. Now, top-notch game designers, developers, engineers are hard to find.
Yeah,
rare.
but you don't even need top-notch because no. Sorry, hear me out. Because we don't have to build the best game possible. We just have to beat Forged Alliance. That game was built 13 years ago when there were 4-core CPUs. Since then, we've got Unreal Engine to make it easier. We've got we can throw determinism in the bin and just make a server-side sort of simulation. And
we're going to throw determinism in the bin?
Yeah, it's in the bin, man. Because aren't you doing that with your sim for Intergalactic Space Empires?
No. It's fully simulated.
Yeah. So
it's got to be simulated.
Yeah. Well, it can still be simulated. It just doesn't have to be deterministically simulated. Because if the server is doing all the calculations, then
that's true.
All the clients don't have to replicate it.
No, you're absolutely right. If you're going to use a client server model and you're going to run the sim on the server, then you automatically you get a lot of stuff for free, but you got to pay for the server cost. So you do need to figure out a way to monetize it, because if you don't monetize it, you have no way to pay the server fees. And the servers are like, single servers on Google Cloud is like $27 a month. So, if you start dividing the cost,
Yeah, but you can have one of the players as a server. So you just pick the player, you do the ping to all the different players. It's funny how I'm explaining to you how to build Supcom 3. I find this really interesting.
That's fine. Today, with fiber and low latency networks, what you just proposed is actually a viable solution.
So this is why we don't need $25 million to build Supcom 3. We don't need to build it to be the best game possible to build. We just need to beat Supcom 1. And that is possible without $25 million.
I like your attitude. I like where you're going with this because you want to build this. You want to build this.
There's a couple of people who want to do this sort of stuff.
If we're gonna build this thing, let's figure it out.
All right. We're doing it.
Let's do this thing. Like kids, and you're like, let's build a tree fort. Let's do it. I got some lumber.
Chris, you don't sound too old for anything. You're gonna build a tree fort. All right, cool.
What interview in the history of gaming old farts devolved into let's do this, let's fucking do it.
Let's do it. But with so we've got a small budget game, and we've got Chris Taylor, which carries a lot of weight. We've got an audience of Forged Alliance who are still playing the game after 13 years, and we've got some really obvious ways how to build it and market it. So now we just need a publisher. Who's that?
A publisher that has an appetite for classic RTS. Well, I think you're closest when you mentioned Paradox. I know Fred, the CEO of Paradox, and I can shoot him an email and I could say there's an appetite to build a Supreme Commander 3.
Yeah.
What do you think, Fred? That we can start there.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. And it doesn't is it better to just not make it Supreme Commander, just a spiritual successor? Because then we don't have to jump through Square Enix hoops.
Yeah. I mean, to say you're going to have to jump through hoops is kind of like saying you're going to go to Hollywood and ask Steven Spielberg if you can do Jaws, the sequel to Jaws, or Close Encounters. It's not a hoop. The hoop isn't hollow in the middle, right? It's solid. There's nothing
jump through walls.
You can't jump through solids.
But it's yours. It was your IP. They're just giving it back to you.
Doesn't mean anything. I think you're on the right track because I'm on that track. Okay, so what I'm doing is I made intergalactic space. I'm building intergalactic space empire.
Yeah.
Right. So I went around. The hoop.
Yeah. No, I get that.
I said I'm building my own engine and I'm building my thing. So you probably have a better opportunity here to build it on Kanugi using my technology than going the other way around. Okay. Now, what would it take to do that? It would take. It wouldn't actually take that much from a technology standpoint. It would take a lot from a content. Like you need to build content. Content costs a lot of money. Okay.
But I think we should be we need to be making the using an engine like Unity or something like that, because I know you personally want to build things from scratch because you love it, right? And that's what you want to do. But from budgetary point of view, let's just use Unity and save $10 million in rendering costs and getting physics working and pathfinding and all that sort of stuff. It just makes the project viable, right?
Yeah, I mean, read the fine print on Unity, by the way.
Why? Which fine print is that?
Well, read the fine print on Unity. It's important to read it, meaning what you owe them when it's free and when you have to pay. I haven't read the fine print in a long time myself.
Yeah. It used to be that you just had to pay if you were going for the mobile devices or something, but I don't know if that's the case anymore.
I don't actually think Unity brings you much. So here, how long is this thing we can talk all night. I mean, because here's the reality of it. An RTS plays on a map, okay? The hardest part about it is creating the content of the map and creating the units and the pathfinding system and the physics engine And if you skip the AI, if you don't have an AI opponent, which you may not want or need, you don't need to go there. So if you trim it down to just moving stuff around on a map, you really want to focus on the Pathfinder and the physics. And then there's a whole bunch of targeting code, and there's visibility code, like who you can see. It's called the intelligence, the intel model.
Mm-hmm.
The intel model is going to burn some brain cells.
Yeah.
That's who you can see, who you can't see, when you could see them, and now you can't see them because they're either visually out of range or they are electronically out of range.
Yeah.
Okay. And in a space game or a future game like Supreme Commander, not space, but in the future, you have to kind of make some tough design decisions about whether or not you want to use future tech as it will be, or future tech as it's thought to be, or you want it to be. Yeah. You have to make a bunch of really interesting, creative decisions. And sometimes those decisions are based on science, and sometimes they're built on emotions and gameplay value.
Yeah.
So we would really need to have almost like a series of these videos where we walk through all of the different components that break down an RTS game.
That sounds like a terrible thing to do. Let's do it. That sounds terrific. But one question, Chris, given that there will be people who actually do this, are we wiping the obligation of your ownership of these ideas? Can we steal them all and actually do it?
Sure.
Sweet.
Sure. Anything I talk about on this video is public domain now.
Sweet.
And I'm happy to teach the next generation of designers and engineers and RTS gaming system architects all of my dirty little tricks and secrets, which aren't dirty. They just clickbait's better if they're dirty. But the fact is that I almost took a job. Well, I don't say almost. I toyed with the notion of taking a job as a professor of computer science for a university.
Yeah.
To literally teach people how to build games. And it's a really great idea. It's probably where I should be now in my career and in my life. I should be teaching them how to do it. But it was in another state, and I didn't want to move. I don't want to leave my home.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually doing something kind of fun. I'm running a team of cloud architects, and I'm doing cloud architecture because I got into cloud architecture pretty heavy with Kanugi, and I really enjoyed it. And so I got this gig in order to kind of be able to do something that was not directly involving with games. Because you know what? I kind of needed to take a break from gaming, and then I wanted gaming to be my passion again.
Yeah.
So that's been working out really well for me, but it's taking a lot more time. The COVID thing kind of shifted my my focus a bit. To be fair, it's not exactly a small life. It's not a small event in my life.
Right.
It's a pretty big event, right? And then we had rioting, just as a cherry on top. We had rioters with COVID. And I'm thinking, what next? Monster truck? Maybe monster truck should be a big part of this.
Yeah. And you live in Seattle too, right? Yeah, the chop zone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the whole chop zone thing. And of course, this is like the tech hub. I mean, if you think about what Seattle has in it in terms of technology with Microsoft, Amazon, Google's up here now in multiple campuses.
Yeah.
Of course, we have this is the home of Costco and Starbucks, Boeing. This is quite a city.
Yeah, it's an important city in the world, isn't it? It's a technology city. And in the middle of that, you have people just taking over suburbs and erecting barriers.
So I went off into cloud architecture because I think gaming and cloud architecture is the future of gaming. I think it's all going to be about the cloud. I think these guys are really slow to figure it out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter what your game is if it doesn't have a cloud component or a connected component. There's so much you get out of the cloud. I mean, the cloud, you cannot simplify it down to just saying cloud and walking off. You have to realize that cloud, it's about being able to compute massively complex things instantaneously because you have scale, or being able to connect to things all over the world, or be able to store things. So let me give you an example. in Intergalactic Space Empire, it runs in a server in the cloud.
Yep.
Well, if you were to shut your browser, or the game were to crash, or a router, or a switch were to fail,
Yep.
it's all preserved. It's like a Google Doc of gaming.
Yep.
Imagine this, Mike, never losing a save, never losing a game, never having a game crash. That is Intergalactic Space Empire. Your game never, you just hit Command R or fix whatever technical glitch, and you're back in the game.
You're
right
an
where
Apple
you
user. You're an Apple
What's
user? Command R. Is it like a
That's
Macintosh
just
thing?
reload the browser. That's
Oh
just
my god.
let's just reload your effing browser.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And then with all the progressive stuff that you were talking about, where it downloads, so you start playing straight away, and it starts filling in the game with the assets. I think that's a really cool idea.
So let's end this on a high note. If things keep going the way they're going for me in my experiments, and browser tech keeps on evolving, we are going to have Supreme Commander 3 in a browser.
Right. That's cool.
We are.
Nice.
It's probably 4 or 5 years away, not 1 or 2 years away, because of the sophistication, because the technology still has to evolve with throughput. Like WebGL2 is way better than WebGL1. WebGL1 is amazing. I don't want to disparage, or I don't want to trivialize WebGL 1.0, but it doesn't do some things that are really, really important, like instancing. Okay, like if you want to make a forest full of trees, you don't want to have to render them all one at a time and move that data over the bus to the GPU.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of things that WebGL2 does, but WebGL2 isn't 100% compatible across all browsers yet.
Yeah, but you don't need to be compatible with all browsers. You just need two.
Chrome, whatever. So, and Firefox, and maybe Opera, which runs on the same code base as Chrome, and Edge is running on the same code base as Chrome. So, like, when you look at the top 5 browsers right now, they're pretty much all awesome. But they're, in 5 years' time, we are going to see leaps and bounds of progress, so that a Supreme Commander style game in all of its glory, no exceptions, no excuses, will be running in a browser.
Understood.
And we will be back in business. So if you want to plan for that day, the folks watching this video should be studying that pathway, and not using Unity, and not using Unreal, and not getting distracted by shiny things like that, but instead be focusing on the underlying systems, which is pathfinding and intelligent systems, and articulating units in 3D so that they can kind of make barrels and turrets move and tracks turn and do all that stuff. And I'll tell you what, that doesn't matter about the engine. That same logic would have to be infused in any engine. I mean, you don't want to be using Unity's hierarchical 3D animation system. It's not going to be performant. It's not going to give you what you want. They're writing general purpose systems. Plus, it's in C# right now. I think they're moving it to C++. The C# isn't as performant as C++.
It's pretty performant though, because they recompile it into native code. It's not actually running C#.
I'll be honest with you. C#, if they're doing anything beyond just running it as a runtime for C#, which is a byte coded language running on its own VM.
Yeah, no, it's not doing that. They decompile it, they recompile it into native code. It's that IL2CPP type of thing. But if
they're doing that,
if
they're doing that, then their performance would be good.
Yeah, you still have issues with the garbage collection is the main one, killing you.
The next thing.
Frames per second. Yeah, but then
you gotta know how to write code.
Right.
You gotta know how to write proficient code.
Yeah.
Are you telling me you're on top of this already?
Well, I know the problems. It doesn't mean I can actually do it, but I know like some of the concepts to use and stuff, because I've got a game on the Steam store that I made. It's a crappy little VR game that I made. It's called Bloodstream, and it's it's not complete, but I ran out of budget. Publishers, right?
Yeah. Hey, tell me all about it. The thing is that if you're writing code on the client side in JavaScript, which by the way, we've got advances happening in the browser to run a sort of, it's almost like we're going to Java in the browser. It's called WebAssembly. It's called WASM.
Yep.
And WASM does this really interesting thing where it gives you performance. I think it kind of starts looking like Java level performance because it compiles it down into an IL that runs the same as your just-in-time compiled JavaScript,
Right.
but without JIT pass. And
Yep.
it also gives you things that JavaScript doesn't give you, right? Like you don't do garbage collected work. You don't do garbage collection, so you have to statically allocate.
Yep.
And I believe, and then that gives you back a ton. So between that on the browser and running in the cloud with high-end hardware in the cloud, in WebGL2, you've got your future RTS platform. And believe me, do not think it's janky. It is not janky. You go full screen. You're in it.
No, I don't think it's janky, but I do think it's hard to go to a publisher and say, I need $25 million to build this thing from scratch and make an engine. And, the sales are going to be small, right? But maybe it's a different story to say the sales going to be small, but it's not going to cost $25 million because I'm going to take every shortcut and convenience feature, like I'm going to use Unreal Engine or Unity, and it's not going to be in the cloud, and make a bunch of different decisions. And it's not going to be the pinnacle of mankind. It's not going to be the best game that Chris Taylor could make, but it's going to be a worthy successor that's better than Forged Alliance because it just uses all the hardware. Well, uses more of the hardware, uses more cores, that type of thing. So it has different sorts of networking. So things like you could reconnect if the game disconnected. Why can't we reconnect again? Like, you can build that, we just don't. You were saying how you can like save games, and if it crashes, the cloud saves it. Well, you could also just save it to disk, right? So it could have been streaming the 10 frames ago to the disk slowly, and you could have that. So you can add in all of these quality of life things, and I believe you can do it on a much smaller budget than 25 million. And maybe that would make it appealing to the publisher, because now the publisher isn't signing up for a huge amount of money, they're signing up for a shorter amount of money. And you can see there is a glaring hole in the RTS industry. Like, it's huge, because like Planetary Annihilation was a contender, right? It was. And what else had the RTS had strategic zoom and the flow economy? There's none.
Yeah, I like
years.
a lot of what you're saying. By the way, I want you to know that you remind me of me more than not. Like a can-do attitude, right? You don't want to hear people tell you that you can't do anything. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah,
but
we can
understand that when you bring together a group of people, because you can't do it, well, I say this as I'm doing it on my own. You can't do this on your own, and I'm doing it. But I'm not really succeeding in a timeline, right? Like, I'm taking years to do this because I'm doing it on my own. And you're probably going to want to do it in 3 to 4 years at most. The thing is you are correct in a lot of what you were saying, but know that when you bring together a new group of people who have not done it before, they do tend to have some thrash, some heat that comes out of the system. And you learn and you throw stuff away and you do stuff. So my team built Total Annihilation and then went into Supreme Commander and then Supreme Commander Forged Alliance. So they evolved over it. And that's a large span of time. That's probably 10 years. Okay. So, sometimes there's no avoiding the time, but if there's somebody like me and you get on a call with me and I've got your team, say you get your team of 10 folks or 20 people and they have questions and I answer their questions and I teach them and I give them guidance. I could cut that time down, okay? And that will be something that I'm happy to do for free, for to give back, okay? So if you have questions for me, I'll try to provide answers.
And thank you very much. That's really great to hear. And I know millions of, well, not millions, but everyone's going to love to hear that. But even better would be if you go to a publisher and get the money and build Supreme Command. Oh well, the next RTS. Let's do it. Let's go to a publisher.
Yeah, if only those publishers, cared. I really don't think they do. I really don't think they do. It's sad, but if you COVID makes things really hard too. I don't know if you know this, but I planned to go to California to go to the various trade show events that were happening in California this year, and they all were canceled.
Right.
And you know where the real magic happens? The magic happens in the pubs, in the bars, in the social gatherings that take place after the trade show.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
Gone. So 2020 might be a write-off, but I wouldn't say give up on this. I'd say this is something, if you're passionate about it and you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. But there is a lot of work that can be done. Like, let's change the example so everybody can relate to it. You want to make a movie. You want to make a Quentin Tarantino movie, which means it has, it's not all about the special effects. It's about the dialogue and the characters and the locations and the cinematography.
Yeah.
It's not Avatar. Because if you're saying to me, if you told me if we met in film school and you said, I want to make Avatar, I'd say, really, Mike? You want to make Avatar? Avatar is kind of shooting too high, right? Let's make Reservoir Dogs. Let's do something like that. Okay? Yeah. We can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do we need first? We need a script. So you and your team need to start working on a game design document.
Right.
Okay? You need to have a visual target. You need to know what your feature set looks like. You need to do that homework first. If you build all that out, you're then ready to have a conversation for where you're going to get the actual production. You're going to go to production. So I think there's a lot of work while COVID is happening and the world is uncertain. We don't know if it's going to be the zombie apocalypse or not. Meanwhile, you can work on some of those core things.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. And that was another question, is what do you actually need for the pitch? Because the Supcom pitch, you had quite a lot, didn't you? You had
well,
did you have like a project plan?
I actually had signed. Okay, so get this. So there was a company called Vivendi. And Vivendi was this roll-up of all these companies. I don't even know. It was like an invented company that was part of this and part of that. And they were going, and they wanted to publish Supreme Commander. And they were coming up to my office in Kirkland on Monday. And it was a Friday afternoon. And I went home and I wrote the entire design document for Supreme Commander on Saturday morning from 6 a.m. till noon, both days, Saturday and Sunday, 12 hours.
Yeah.
I built it out, V10 of the design. Now, the design was nowhere near complete, but it was thick enough that you could hit someone with it. Okay, right. That was kind of the litmus test. Could you hit someone hard with the paper? And I did. And when they showed up at the office, I was able to take this thing and I was able to slam it down on the counter and say, there's the design. And they were like, ooh, okay, we believe you. We're not going to read it, but we believe you have a design. And if you cut open to it at any point, it had intelligent shit. It wasn't garbage.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Latin placeholder. So they ended up not signing the deal because their CEO was out of town. It was a comical story. They sat on it for 2 weeks and I called them up and I said, I've signed my side of the contract, but if you don't sign yours by Friday, I'm quashing the contract. And guess what? Their CEO was out of town. They couldn't get his name on the contract. Right. So I quashed it and I signed it with EA. And then EA didn't want the deal anymore, so I moved it to THQ. Three publishers on Supreme Commander.
Yeah.
3 publishers. That's the kind of shit that you have to be able to deal with. Stupid. Anyway, you should have a design document even if it's not complete.
No, I got that bit. But what else? What else do you have to get through a publisher besides that?
You have to have a team, and your team has to have qualifications. Your team should have experience with the subject matter.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to give a bunch of people money to go learn. They want people to build. Right. You know, like if you hired someone to put an extension on your house, do you want the contractor to show up saying, we've never put an extension on a house before, but we're willing to learn?
Yeah. And you can pay us to do it.
And you're going to pay us to do it. Instead of going to school, where we should have gone, or got experience working as junior people on a larger project, we want you to pay us to learn. That's not a good conversation.
That's a pretty huge barrier. I don't know how to get past that one.
Okay, well, I'm not here to ruin your day. I'm
Well,
just here to tell you the reality. Do you want to punch me right now? Do you want to punch me?
No. What about project plan, that type of thing, cost estimates?
Yeah. You do need a timeline. You need to be able to say when you're going to ship it, and you got to be able to back it up if somebody asks questions.
Yeah, milestones, all that sort of stuff.
Yep, it's got to be broken down on milestones. Now, here's what usually happens in the games business. Publishers want to know that you're going to build it in 2 years, and it takes you 4. We had a saying. It was not a very classy saying, and the saying was you needed to get them pregnant. Because if you think about how nasty that metaphor really is, if someone's pregnant with if you're pregnant with their baby, they're going to keep feeding you because they're carrying your baby. So you're a developer, you get pregnant with the publisher's future business revenue. Right? It's a kind of a terrible thing now that I'm saying it out loud, but it's not horrible. It's just reality. You get them over the barrel.
We're talking about just getting your foot in the door?
Well, it's like you do a $5 million deal, and you're working on the game for a year and a half, and you've blown through most of the $5 million, and then you need another $5 million, and they don't have any choice because they're screwed. They have to pay it.
I see.
But remember this, you're never going to make $1 because they're over on their end going, those bastards screwed us.
Yeah.
And we paid them to learn. They know they paid you to learn now.
Yeah.
So this is the dark we're talking about some dark shit.
Now these are the dirty secrets coming out.
Now that actually is a dirty secret. Now, did I ever sign a contract knowing that I wasn't going to finish the game on time? No. And in the later years of gas-powered games, we delivered on our timeline on all of our later games. So we came through. But in the early days, like Supreme Commander, Dungeon Siege was only supposed to take 2 years, and I'm taking 4.
Yeah.
So that's a defensive argument for the publisher, which we never. If you shut off this video before you got to this stage, you'd never have heard that part.
I think I didn't hear that part because we've been doing this for 2 hours and my brain switched off for a second. Sorry, what was the thing about Dungeon Siege? And
I'm saying that when we signed the deal, it was only going to be a 2-year deal, and then it turned into 4 years.
How did it turn into a 4-year deal, though?
Well, because we didn't know what we were doing, and we were learning on the job. We didn't know how to make an RPG game.
Oh, okay. I thought you just said that you Oh, okay. So you never knowingly underquoted.
You never knowingly try to deceive your publishing partner, but you end up doing it because you don't know what you're doing. Because games are much bigger and more complicated than you can imagine.
Right. I understand
games
what you're talking about.
Are hard.
So what was your job at Wargaming?
I was the general manager and creative director of the studio. And I was also technically the president also. So it was really an interesting job, but it was a management job for the most part. There was a designer, Eric Williamson, who was largely the lead designer of the new game that we were working on. And he left, when I left the company in the fall of 2016, they let him go shortly thereafter, and he went over to Epic, and now he's the lead designer of Fortnite.
Yeah. Oh,
so,
cool. Right.
Yeah. You can't understate that one.
Yeah.
He went on to become the lead designer of Fortnite.
Nice.
Yes. And you know what? He's smart and absolutely perfect for the job, and he found the perfect job for him. And guess what? He's been very successful at that job. And I love the story because I was basically taught Eric game design because I hired him when he was 20, and I was very proud of him. And I thought he absolutely was. It was made of this. He had the perfect skill set for being a world-class game designer.
Yeah.
And when I left, I was disappointed that they cut him from the roster because I felt that he had the right guy.
So he was working with you at Wargaming?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was leading the project that we were working on at Wargaming.
And then he was cut, and he went on and made that instead.
And
That's
went on
pretty
to
funny.
lead the team. Went on to lead the team creatively on Fortnite.
Nice.
True story. True
Yep.
story.
And how did you end up at Wargaming?
Well, I sold Gaspard Games to Wargaming.
Right. And then
I
you
sold
sort
them
of
my
went with
company.
it
Yeah.
as the general manager?
Yeah. I became the general manager. I went from being the CEO and owner of the company to the general manager of the studio. And we worked on a game for 3 years. And after 3 years, I felt that I needed to make a change.
Yeah.
I needed to pivot. I needed to go do my own thing.
Yeah.
It's just one of those stories that, maybe we don't want to talk about it too much. But the reality is that I'd been doing the same thing in a management role, and I wanted to get my hands back in code.
Yep.
And when I went on to I literally started in 2017 afresh, with the idea that I wanted to go into cloud and do all this work. I have loved that, and it's been so good for me as a person that I went from management back to doing what I love, which is
Yep.
writing code.
Yeah.
And so, and now what I'm doing is I'm in the cloud architecture space, and to be honest, it's a perfect complement to what I'm doing with Kanugi.
Yeah.
So I truly am on the right path now.
Yeah. And what game are you working on at Wargaming?
Well, I can't say what I was working on at Wargaming. That's confidential. And so I have to leave it at that. But I would say this, though, it was cool. It was pretty darn cool.
Sounds really cool. All right. Shall we
It was
leave it
cool.
there? I'm
Yeah.
sure that'll kick off a few questions. I think, I've got about 70 questions here, and we asked about 3 of them. Do you think we can have another conversation another time and maybe ask another 2 or 3 more?
Why don't you run this video for everybody, and if they watch it and they want more, we'll give them more. But if they've had enough dark, dirty secrets, and they're also depressed because it's harder, the mountain is taller and slippier than they thought.
Yeah.
We'll stop.